At 6:42 a.m., a backhoe carved a zipper down my north pasture where only grass and ant trails should be. I walked out with coffee in one hand, camera in the other, and counted 3 things wrong before I hit the fence. The trench crossed my recorded boundary, the pipe wasn't marked with any utility locate colors, and the foreman waved like he was doing me a favor. "Morning! Pipeline install for Lakeside Estates," he yelled over the engine, as though Lakeside was a magic word that exempts you from trespass. "Through my ranch?" I asked. He gestured at a folded printout. "We've got approval from the board." "Which is adorable," I said, "but I'm not on your board, and this is not your land." I aimed my phone at the trench and hit record. The camera doesn't care about anyone's feelings. It loves details. The PVC was Schedule 80, 12-inch, gasketed bell and spigot joints. Whoever designed this wasn't moving garden hose. This was a community main. Through my pasture. No posted easement, no county permit sleeve, no 811 utility locate paint, just a mission and a timeline. I pointed to my survey stake, a bit of rebar with a fresh cap I'd set after a boundary walk last month. "That cap marks the line. You are on me. Step back." The foreman tapped his radio, looked over my shoulder, and suddenly I had an audience. 2 men in matching polos with HOA embroidered over their hearts, and the body language of people who think the word community is a utility knife. Clipboard guy took over. "Sir, under our covenants, we have authority to install and maintain common utilities," he said. "On your common area," I replied, gently. "Not on mine." I handed him a laminated card I keep for situations exactly this wild. No recorded easement, no permission granted, all activity recorded. Call me or my counsel for access. He didn't take it. "We sent letters." "To whom?" I asked. "To, homeowners." "I'm a rancher," I said. "I own a parcel, not a lot. I didn't get a letter." Clipboard smiled like he was about to explain gravity to me. "We have a historic right to cross here. The developer planned it." "Show me the recorded easement," I said. He blinked. "We have board minutes." "Board minutes don't run with land. Deeds do." He nodded at the backhoe anyway. "Keep going," he told the operator. And that's when my coffee stopped tasting like coffee. I called the sheriff's non-emergency line. No drama in my voice, just the facts. "Hi, I'm at 1082 Millstone. A contractor is trenching a pipeline across posted private property without a recorded easement or owner consent. I have video. I've asked them to stop. Please send a deputy to keep the peace." The dispatcher repeated my address and told me a unit was en route. While we waited, Clipboard tried a friendlier tone. "Look, everybody needs water. Our current main runs along Creekside Drive. It keeps washing out. This is safer." "I get needing water," I said. "I don't get taking a shortcut across my land because planning is hard." The deputy arrived, hat low, face neutral, the exact mood I needed. He listened to us both, took my deed and plat map, asked Clipboard for the recorded easement, and got what I knew he'd get: a folder of HOA covenants and an email printout. The deputy chewed his cheek, the way people do when the answer is obvious and the day is long. "You can't trench across private property without an easement," he said to the foreman. "Pack it up." Foreman groaned but nodded. The backhoe hissed to a stop. They shoved pipe bells half buried under loose spoil and retreated to the shoulder, the trench a stuttering scar down my pasture. I filmed the whole pause, walked it with a tape, marked the depths with a stick, and took stills of every joint and bend they had set. Evidence isn't spicy, it's boring, and very useful later. The HOA guys didn't leave. One pointed toward the hill. "We'll be back with a court order. You can't obstruct utilities." "I'm obstructing trespass," I said. "Bring recorded paper." They didn't bring paper that day. They brought a letter, pastel of course, accusing me of interfering with community infrastructure and threatening to assess me for damages incurred by delay. It read like a Mad Libs written by a committee who thinks all land is the same if the grass is green. It also included a map with a thick highlighter line marching across my parcel like a toddler drew a pipeline on a placemat. No meets and bounds, no legal description, no recording stamp. The last page said, "We have an implied easement." I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was the kind of wrong that makes your brain tingle. Implied easements are real, but they grow out of necessity and historical use between the same parcels, not out of convenience for a brand new path someone dreams up because their culvert is annoying. They had an existing pipeline in their own right-of-way. It failed because they neglected it. That doesn't create a magical right to cross my property. That creates a budget problem for them. I went to the county recorder with a plan and a portable scanner. I pulled everything touching my parcel and the parcels around me: plats, deeds, utility easements, old ditch rights, and a subdivision map for lakeside estates that someone drew like the world ended at their entrance monument. The only easement across my land, a 1963 agricultural ditch right to carry up to 1.5 CFS from Willow Spring down to the old Millhouse Orchard. Recorded. Real. The HOA's pipeline? Not on paper. Ever. I also did the unglamorous neighbor thing and asked around. The rancher up the road, Gus, scratched his chin and said the quiet part. Their water comes from Willow Spring. Always has. The developer made a handshake deal with the previous owner, never paid a cent after year 1. If they'd treated him right, Phase 2 would have had a proper easement and maybe a small mutual water company. But here we are. He jerked a thumb toward the hill. Willow's still running. Who owns Willow Spring? I asked. Old man died. His niece moved to the city, wants to sell the 5-acre corner with the spring. Nobody bites because the HOA uses it for free and she doesn't want to fight. You like fights? I like paper and valves. That night I sat at my kitchen table with maps spread like a conspiracy theorist and called 2 people. First, Sloan, a water rights attorney who does not waste verbs. Second, Arya, a water rights consultant who has more state permit numbers memorized than birthdays. I walked them through the trench, the letter, and the whisper about Willow Spring. Arya pulled up the database. Willow Spring, she murmured, permit 142387, certified 0.8 CFS, domestic and irrigation, point of diversion at any corner of Section 12, appurtenant to 5 acres in 1247. Owner of record, the deceased uncle's trust, no recorded change to HOA, no mutual company. She paused. They've been using it? I said, sounds like it. Sloane's voice was cool water on a hot day. They trench across your land without an easement, that's trespass. Their letter doesn't change that. Don't touch their pipe. Don't fill the trench. They'll say you destroyed evidence. Document and wait. Meanwhile, if Willow's owner wants to sell and the water right is intact, you can buy it. With notice, you can require the HOA to contract for service or cease using the resource. This is not revenge. This is property law. But you must be surgical. County environmental health, state water resources, and if you end up controlling a public water system, public utility rules may apply. They'll do it clean. I slept better than you'd think. Not because I wanted to starve a neighborhood out of spite, but because I wanted the rule book back on the table. You want water? You pay for it. Or at least you get permission and record it. You don't carve my pasture and call it community. You don't attach yourself to a spring someone else owns and call it implied. The next morning I called Denise. Her name was Leela. She sounded tired and relieved at the same time. If you can close, I will sell the spring parcel. I'm done getting letters about my responsibility to keep their taps on. My uncle did favors. They turned them into rights. I made a checklist. Due diligence on title, confirm the water right is quiet and certified, confirm the point of diversion and the existence of a literal valve, confirm who has been maintaining the headworks, nobody, apparently, confirm with county that buying the spring didn't make me a public water supplier overnight, confirm with state that a change of ownership and operator for a small supply is a form, not a saga, and confirm with my own eyes that the HOA's main truly tied into Willow Spring and not some mystery well under a gazebo. I didn't touch anything. I took photos, I drew a sketch, I texted Sloan, 1 sentence. There's a real valve. He replied, buy the spring. Then we'll teach them what notice looks like. Legal note for the internet. This is a story, not advice. Water law is hyper-local. Do not mess with any water system. Don't close valves you don't own. Don't trench anything you don't have permission for. Get counsel, get permits, get calm.
Buying a spring is less like buying a house and more like adopting a very old, very stubborn pet. The purchase and sale agreement was the easy part. 5 acres at the northeast corner of Section 12, including all appurtenant water rights and improvements, subject to existing recorded easements, of which there were none that benefited the HOA. Leela signed fast. She wanted out. I opened escrow in an LLC we formed for the purpose, Highline Water Co., because owning a source personally is how you end up fielding midnight calls about hydrants you never installed. The LLC would hold the spring, the headworks, and the paper. Paper first. Aria pulled the state file for permit 14-2387 and gave me the highlight reel. The right dated back to 1956, converted from a historic use on the orchard, certificated for 0.8 cubic feet per second, with use categories domestic and irrigation on the 5-acre parcel. No transfers to the HOA, no change in point of diversion, no enlargement, and this was key, a note that the developer of Lakeside once filed an application for a change in place of use and then abandoned it for non-payment of fees. The result? The HOA's right was 10 years of habit, not law. Sloan started the legal choreography. Step 1, recorded deed transferring the spring parcel and all appurtenant rights to Highline Water Co. Step 2, file with the state a report of conveyance documenting the transfer of the water right. Step 3, notify the County Environmental Health Department that ownership of a small water source had changed and file an operator form with a testing plan. We're talking bacteria, nitrates, the boring stuff that keeps people alive. Step 4, send a formal cease and contract letter to the HOA. Highline is the lawful owner-operator of Willow Spring. You are presently connected without a contract. Within 30 days, cease unauthorized diversions or execute a supply contract at fair market rates with easement terms for any facilities located on Highline lands. Continued diversion without agreement will result in termination consistent with state law and county health guidance. We will coordinate with county for any public health contingency. We weren't playing gotcha. We set that 30-day clock in coordination with the county health officer. I met her in a beige office where all serious county business happens. She appreciated 3 things. I wasn't trying to yank taps without a plan. I was offering a contract at market rates, not extortion, and I would provide interim access to potable water at a metered standpipe if the HOA refused to sign. We drafted a public notice together that said in plain words, if service is terminated for failure to contract, a temporary fill station will be available at the following hours and location. Was that dramatic? Yes. Was it legal and humane? Also yes. Meanwhile, Sloan fired a second volley, a trespass notice and a demand to remove the pipeline we'd found in my posture, plus a proposed easement if they wanted to keep it. $100,000 for a non-exclusive 12-foot-wide utility easement with legal description, fence and roadway restoration, indemnity, and an annual fee. Before you gasp at the number, understand what easements do to land value and operations. A recorded utility easement is forever. It's not a path you can unthink when trends change. Price it like permanence. The HOA hired counsel, finally. Hart and Mackey LLP, whose letterhead had seen a lot of HOA letter writers. They replied with a pile of paragraphs and a couple of arguments, none of which aged well in the sunlight. 1. Implied easement by necessity. Sloan's reply, your necessity is self-created. You have an existing main within your subdivision. 2. Prescriptive easement via 10 years of use. Sloan's reply, prescriptive rights don't grow across government-regulated sources without clarity, and your pipe across our land is brand new. 3. Public utility status. You can't cut off a public water system. Sloan's reply, Highline is not a utility. We are a private source. We are offering a contract. If you want to be public, file with the state and buy the spring. Behind the letters, we did the unglamorous grind. I hired a hydrologist, Nico, to sample Willow Spring. He drew off an aseptic bottle, we logged temperature and turbidity, and he invented reasons to say words like coliform in ways that comforted me. Results came back clean. We scheduled routine testing and posted the results on a simple site I threw together called Highline Water Notices because transparency beats rumor every time. We inspected the headworks. The lid was tired, the valve was functional but crusty. We installed a proper locking mechanism, a tamper seal, and a little camera pointed at the vault, not to play gotcha, but to avoid surprises. We put up a small, tasteful sign, Highline Water Co., Willow Spring, authorized access only. For service call, no logos, no italics, just information. On day 10 of the 30-day clock, we got the HOA's first real move, a proposed interim agreement that let them keep taking water at historic rates, i.e. free, while we resolved title. Slotto redlined it into confetti. There's nothing interim about continued theft, he wrote. On day 14, they attempted a TRO, temporary restraining order, arguing that we sought to weaponize water. The judge asked one question. Do you have a contract or recorded right to that source? Their lawyer hemmed. The judge denied the TRL and told us to give 7 days extra notice before any termination and to coordinate with the county on health measures. Fair. During this, the trench in my pasture sat like a bad idea someone hit pause on. They'd laid 220 feet of main, then stopped cold when the deputy told them to. It dried, cracked, and annoyed me. I left it. Touching their pipe would have become the next accusation. I did, however, install a simple field gate across the cut because cattle are not known for respecting mystery ditches. On day 21, we sent the 7-day notice the judge requested. It was a masterclass in calm. Citations to the state water code, reference to the county health plan, hours for the temporary fill station, a specific date and time for termination at the valve. We offered a supply contract again. Per 1,000-gallon rate based on the region's rural water tariffs, maintenance fee, meter installation at the headworks, and, this part they hated, verification of an easement for any pipe crossing our lands. If they wanted service, they had to behave like adults. Their board meeting that week was, from what Priya texted me, a small storm. "We can't pay a rancher for water we've used for free," someone said. A resident replied, "We paid with floods and lawsuits." Another asked, "What if we drill our own well?" And a third answered, "Cool, in a drought after permits in fractured basalt?" The property manager wisely suggested we should sign. They didn't, not yet. Day 28 came. We tested the notice line, residents were aware, the county had its signage ready, and I had a plumber on standby to install a meter if they agreed at the last minute. Hart and Mackey called Sloan with a late-night Hail Mary. "What if we pay but you drop the easement price?" Sloan, with the patience of a stone, said, "Sign the contract. We'll discuss the easement tomorrow." Day 30, 9 a.m. County Health on site, Sloan on site, a deputy on site because adults behave better around hats. I opened the vault with the county officer watching. The camera blinked its little red dot. I put a tag on the valve with the time. Highline Water Co. Termination for non-contract diversion, 9:02 a.m. I turned the wheel a quarter turn, slow, then another until the headgate's trickle became a hush. No grand gesture, no spectacle. Just a closed valve that belonged to us. Closed with notice. 10 minutes later, my phone pinged. An email from the HOA board. "We will sign the contract." I didn't smile. I also didn't gloat. I handed the valve heel to the county officer. "When they sign, you can watch me open it." She nodded. "That," she said, "is how it's supposed to work."
They signed at a folding table, under a pop-up canopy the county set up next to the spring road like it was a farmer's market for consequences. Their president, their council, my council, the county health officer, a deputy, me. I slid the supply contract across in a red folder, because red says read me, and Sloan walked the board through the terms in a voice you use for skittish horses and litigation. The guts of it were simple, boring, and non-negotiable. Highline Water Co., my LLC, would supply raw spring water from Willow Spring at a metered turnout at the headworks. The HOA would own everything downstream of the meter. We set a base charge to keep the spring maintained and a volumetric rate pegged to the region's rural tariff, so I wasn't inventing prices, just matching the sheet everybody else already lives by. We capped peak draw at a flow the headgate could sustain without turning the creek into a suggestion. We put in cross-connection control, a real double-check assembly, a lockable cage on the meter, monthly bacterial testing posted publicly, and a clause the board hated but signed anyway. Non-payment or tampering triggers notice, then shut off. Not may, shall. We also made it clear what Highline wasn't, a municipal utility. We weren't taking on hydrants, fire flow guarantees, or responsibility for leaks and cul-de-sacs. They wanted public utility promises at private source prices. That's the combination that gets people hurt. The county health officer backed me up. Stable supply starts with storage. You need a tank. So we added a schedule. The HOA would build a modest on-site storage tank and booster within 90 days to buffer demand and reduce call on the source during peak. It would let me run the spring steady while they slurped in spurts. Good engineering, good neighbor math. Then came the trench. The pipeline they'd started across my pasture wasn't a hypothetical anymore. It was a thing in my dirt. Sloan's trespass demand letter gave them two options. Option A, remove every stick of pipe and restore my pasture to pre-project condition. Proper backfill, compaction, topsoil, reseed, and my inspector signs off. Option B, buy a permanent utility easement for that alignment.
We priced it at $100,000 up front, plus an annual fee indexed to inflation, with a full legal description, restoration obligations, and indemnity. Why the number? Because a recorded easement is forever. It limits what I can do on my own land, it complicates financing, and it drags trucks through a working pasture. Pay once, then pay every year for the privilege. They tried to bargain the fee down to something cute. I slid a sheet across with comps, an appraiser's letter on what a utility easement does to value and operations. Cheap is for driveways. You're asking to own a 12-foot wide slice of his ranch forever. Their counsel pivoted. We'll fix the creekside main, he said. We'll abandon the alignment across your pasture and restore it. Sensible. Expensive for them. The right call. I still needed it in writing, with dates. We wrote a temporary construction license so they could safely backfill and pull pipe without pretending that activity gave them rights. License expires in 30 days. $1 million bond. My inspector on site. No moving the fence to make it easier. I also pushed a clause that made the HOA pay my attorney's fees related to the trench because I don't like paying retail for other people's ambition. Check, check, check. They signed the supply contract, they initialed next to the shutoff clause, they signed the restoration plan for my pasture, they stamped agreed on the storage tank schedule. In exchange, I promised the county officer I'd reopen the valve while the ink was still wet. One more wrinkle. Before the valve, we had to talk about water quality and repressurization. Their system had just been depressurized. The county requires a flush and a bacteriological sample before you declare victory. No cowboy moves. The contract wrote it down. Highline supplies clean, raw water. The HOA treats, flushes, samples, and issues a temporary boil notice if the county says so. And yes, they had to add disinfection downstream. You don't run a community on naked spring water in 2025 just because it tastes like a mountain ad. You chlorinate, you test, you post results. Adults only. They asked for one concession, an audit right on my meter. Fair. If you're paying by the 1,000 gallons, you get to look at the register, compare it to your balancing accounts, and call me if something looks weird. We added a right to witness meter reads and a cellular data logger so I can send them a CSV every month instead of fighting about a picture of spinning dials. Then came the part I didn't write down but still mattered. I apologized to the residents for the whiplash. Not for closing a valve I owned after notice, that was the right move, but for the anxiety they rode while their board tried to lawyer a river. I stepped to the edge of their Facebook group with a short post. You have water. You have a contract. Watch your email for the county's sampling notice. Here's the URL where I'll post meter reads and lab results. Questions? Ask in daylight. Emergencies? Call 911. Not me. Boundaries, but also a human face. With signatures in place, we turned to the trench. The crew that came to restore my pasture looked like they'd been told twice to be on their best behavior. My inspector, an old-school dirt whisperer named Vic, checked compaction in lifts, eyeballed the moisture content, and made them swap the junk spoil for proper topsoil at the top. He raked, he nodded, he planted a boot heel and declared, "That'll settle without swallowing a calf." They spread a seed mix I specified, native pasture grasses, not HOA sports turf, strawed it and set up a temporary fence to keep hooves out until the first 2 mowings. The pipe they'd buried most of the way came out in awkward blue ribs, loaded into a dump, and left my land. I didn't wave. I did breathe. The easement knife fight ended in a draw that felt like a win. They abandoned their claim across my ranch, fixed their in-subdivision main, and kept a route on their side of the fence forever. If they want to bring a new line across my land someday, they can approach with money and humility and a surveyed legal description, not a backhoe. Only after the last initial was inked did I flip the next page and show them the quiet clause Sloan had insisted on, a mutual release of claims tied to the trenching episode effective upon completion of restoration and payment of my fees. Translation, no one sues anyone later about last week's theatrics. If they breached the new contract, different story. But the trench, we buried more than pipe.
You don't realize how noisy plumbing is until it wakes up.
Around dinner, 100 little houses sang their metallic songs, air burping through faucets, pipes rattling their opinion, hot water heaters negotiating with physics. The HOA posted, "Service restored," with an undertone of, "Please don't email us all at once." The county's boil notice stayed up overnight while their post-repair sample incubated. At 10 a.m. the next morning, the lab posted absent for coliform and E. coli. Boil notice lifted. People made coffee like it was a holiday. By noon, my Highline Water Notices page had its first real update. Meter read 24 hours post turn on, XXX gallons. Logistics beat rumor. I set up an automatic daily post of flow totals and a monthly post of lab results because transparency buys me fewer midnight emails. We even put the raw CSV in a public folder so the HOA's resident engineers could build their hobby graphs and argue about meters offline instead of in my inbox. Meanwhile, the HOA did the hard, unglamorous work they'd punted for years. They hired a real water operator, licensed, insured, and allergic to wishful thinking. He mapped their system, found valves that had been buried under mulch since the second Bush administration, and wrote an asset list that looked like a to-do list strapped to a cinder block. They patched their creekside main properly. No duct tape, no, we'll get to it. They put a small storage tank behind their pool with a booster and a chlorine injection point. Measured, not eyeball a tablet. They wrote a flushing schedule. They bought spare parts. They pretended to be a utility until they were one. On my side of the fence, Highline settled into a rhythm that felt suspiciously like peace. I walked to the vault twice a week, checked the tamper seals, brushed leaves off the lid, and watched the meter blink its little green number at me like a dog that wants you to know it did the thing. I sent the county my monthly bacteria sample and nitrate check. I set a calendar reminder to scrub the head box once a quarter so nothing green tried to throw a party in there. I let the camera do what cameras do. See without arguing. Invoices went out, auto pay went on. The HOA paid on time the first 2 months. Late the third, they apologized, and then set up a reserve so Susan from Lot 13 wouldn't write, "Why is our rancher charging late fees on Facebook?" The easement fight went away because there was no easement. The trench sprouted grass. Vic drove by at month 2, stepped off the truck, stumped once and said, "Told you it'd settle clean." He was right. Did anyone get mad anyway? Of course. A guy on a YouTube channel did a 10-minute rant called "Rancher Holds HOA Hostage." Leela, the former Spring owner, posted a single comment under it. "He bought my property, fixed my paperwork, and made them sign for what they were taking. That's not hostage, that's adulthood." Comments off. The board changed shape. The old shortcut committee members didn't run again. Newer faces who had to handle the actual boil notice came in and did something rare. They thanked me in a meeting. Not for the shutoff, that was a bruise, but for forcing the contract and the storage tank. We were one big storm away from a bad day. Now we have a plan. Progress looks like that. Small, grudging, real. We put a sign by the trail, next to the culvert they finally learned not to choke. "Willow Spring supplies this neighborhood. Please keep the area clean." No logos, no branding. Just one sentence that makes people pick up a cup when the wind throws it. I watched a kid read it, frown, and then carry his dad's coffee lid to a trash can that had been there all year. You can't legislate that. You can only make it possible. The weirdest quiet win? The frogs. They didn't care about contracts, but they cared about water that didn't get yo-yoed between starving and blasting. With the headgate steady and the HOA storage tank smoothing out the chaos, the creek below the spring kept a low, decent flow even when the HOA filled their tank and coasted. Frogs sang, dragonflies patrolled. Our Highline Notices page got an extra tab, Creek Log, with a monthly photo from the same point and a one-liner about what we saw. May 1st, red-winged blackbird of the year. August, kids built a leaf boat regatta. People asked if I'd ever sell to the HOA. I said yes, if they offered a fair price and a recorded plan that didn't turn my pasture into a privilege road. Until then, I run a tiny water company with one valve, one meter, and a lot of daylight on the numbers. It's not a fiefdom. It's a boundary you can drink. And because the internet never sleeps, no, I did not turn off anyone's water without notice, without a county plan, or without a contract on the table. We gave 30 days. We posted a fill station. We stood at the vault with the county. We turned it back on the minute the signatures dried. If you want the quick villain story, you'll have to get it from a thumbnail guy who hasn't read a deed. When the dust settled, the count looked like this. The HOA ended up exactly where they should have started, with a contract, a meter, a storage tank, and a map of their own system that wasn't a napkin. They paid my fees for the trench fiasco, they restored my land, and they abandoned the idea that community is a skeleton key that opens every gate. I ended up with a creek that acts like a creek, a spring that's run by paper instead of folklore, and a tiny business that works best when it's invisible. Did anyone end up in court? Not past the quick TRO that got laughed out of chambers. We wrote releases, we kept the sheriffs in the loop, and we let the county health officer be the adult in the room because that's her job. The best fights are the ones you don't have to finish with a judge. If you're in a version of this story right now, someone trenching where they shouldn't, someone borrowing a source because a developer cut a corner 20 years ago, here's the playbook that kept me sane and got to a fix. Not legal advice, just pattern recognition. Don't argue with a backhoe. Call the sheriff calmly, ask them to keep the peace, and use the word trespass with no recorded easement. Don't touch their equipment. Film, date, time. Go to the recorder's office. Pull deeds, plats, and any recorded easements that touch your land. Board approval and developer intent don't run with the land. Recorded instruments do. Learn your water paper. In most states, springs and diversions live in a public database. Find the permit or certificate. Verify owner of record, place of use, point of diversion, and whether someone actually transferred the right or just told a story at a barbecue. Hire boring experts. A water rights consultant will pull the file and translate the hieroglyphics. A water lawyer will keep you from committing a crime of righteousness. Let them write the letters. Coordinate with public health. If there's an actual community tied to a source, you cannot play cowboy with a valve. Work with the county to set a notice period, a fill station, and a sampling plan. It's not only the law, it's moral. Offer a contract, even if you're angry, especially then. Reasonable terms, posted rates, a meter, and boring enforcement language. If they won't sign, you're not shutting off water, you're refusing theft. Price easements like they're forever, because they are. Don't be shy about numbers. Show comps. Make them real. Include restoration, access with, and indemnity. Or offer a tidy alternative. Stay on your side of the fence. Document everything. A timeline with dates, letters sent certified, photos of trenches, videos of valves, lab results with PDFs. Boring beats bluster every day. Keep your mouth small and your pages big. The internet wants villains. Your sheriff, your judge, and your county want documentation. Talk less, file more. When it's over, build the quiet things. A public notice page, a meter with data that anyone can read, a tiny laminated sign that tells the next generation who turned the valve and why. The best part of this mess wasn't the clicky moment where a wheel turned and tapped side. It was the weeks after, when nothing happened except water doing what it's supposed to do because adults agreed on paper to let it. I don't love conflict. I love boundaries. They make neighborliness possible. They turn my side and your side into our creek with a line no one argues about because the line is in a deed and a vault and a meter, not in someone's memory. A coda because life insists on them. 2 months after the contract, a kid from the cul-de-sac left a note at my gate. Thank you for the water. I like the frogs. I stuck it in the Highline binder next to the state certificate and the meter's install photo. Paper that matters. Paper that makes you smile. Both belong. If this helped, share it with the person in your group chat whose HOA thinks implied is a synonym for recorded. Drop your questions below. Rates, easements, meters, county coordination, and I'll rope Sloan or Aria into a Q&A. And if you're staring at a trench in your pasture right now, breathe. You don't need a bigger voice. You need a better folder. Valves turn, so do stories. Put the right hands on the wheel.